can you talk a little bit about PEDs and maybe how they affect the body? I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of folks that are going to be watching this that don't know anything about bodybuilding, or why people would use PEDs, or even what PEDs are.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of bodybuilding for sure. Like for people to deny it, they're just not being truthful with you. So PEDs, it goes well beyond the realm of just anabolic steroids. I mean, we're talking growth hormones, we're talking thyroid hormones, we're talking, insulins, we're talking EPOs, things that boost your red blood cells. There are a lot of different kinds of drugs that are used in bodybuilding, and not just bodybuilding. They're used in many, many major sports, and track and field at the highest levels. Certainly in football, there's certain things that aren't detectable. Of course, the thing with baseball happened, and they kind of shut that down. But when you get people that have millions of dollars at stake or a career, then you got people that are willing to say, okay, well, I'm going to do a little extra. This might land me a huge contract. I mean, think about Barry Bonds. Think about how he looked. Then think about how he looked later in his career. All of a sudden, he got massive, right? Look at Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens was near the edge of retirement. I'm a Houston Astros fan. When they picked him up, I was like, man, he's done. And then all of a sudden, he's a monster again. And I remember my doctor telling me he's taking growth hormone. And I remember thinking, why would a pitcher take growth hormone? Like, I would think more of a batter, somebody who's hitting the ball. But growth hormone rejuvenates tendons and connective tissue and ligaments. And so Roger Clemens all of a sudden is throwing fireballs again. He's dominating. And, I could tell you stories about people at the high level in track and field, especially the sprinters, but well beyond that, almost every event. The people in the Tour de France, people do cycling, all the EPO that they take to boost the red blood cell count, so they have constant levels of oxygen. So whenever you have a lot of money on the stake, when you have careers at stake, I knew a bodybuilder, his name was Mohammed Ben Aziza, and he was one of my favorites. He came from Algeria. Came from a very poor family, and he was a tremendous bodybuilder. And he ended up dying at a contest because he was so dehydrated. He took a lot of diuretics. The most dangerous drug in bodybuilding, by the way, it's diuretics. That's what kills people in bodybuilding. So he took so many diuretics, and he didn't drink water. So, he had this, what they call a dry look on stage. It actually killed him. He dehydrated. They called the ambulance, and the medics came. They saw he had, and they actually gave him potassium, which is not what you want when sodium's low, potassium's high. It actually put him in a cardiac arrest and killed him. But people were like, oh, Momo's stupid. What was he doing? But people didn't realize the money that Mohammed was making in his contest, he was sending back home to his family in Algeria because they had no way to live. He had a reason for doing that. And I'm not saying everybody does, but I'm just saying that circumstances dictate what people do. And if someone says, well, I can be a mediocre player, or I can be a guy who gets a $7 million contract, I mean, let's be honest here. It's real tempting. And you look at bodybuilding, I can be a professional, or I can be just another guy that competes at the local level in the Mr. Columbus. So I could have an advantage. Now in bodybuilding, or so many people do it, it's not even really an advantage. Everybody does it. I don't want to say everybody, but the good bodybuilders, like the professional bodybuilders, they all do certain things. So it exists in sports. To deny that it's out there is just not being truthful. So it definitely is a part of the sport, just being 100% real with you.
Now, so with the thing that happened with baseball and sort of like the government and stuff trying to kind of step in and get involved with things, that stuff was just irritating to me because I understand the role of these drugs, and what I remember. It was on Arsenio Hall show when Lyle Alzado, who, he died from cancer, and they were saying that it was due to steroids,
which have zero effect on cancer, zero.
Right. And and that was kind of the thing, like, hey, don't use steroids because this will happen to you, and this kind of thing, you know, all the way from that to you know, the stuff that, you know, with happening in baseball, and just the knowledge that in pro sports there's all these drugs that are not detectable, and sometimes often actually athletes will take something because they have a a tendon tear.
Oh yeah.
And they just need to, they just need to recover from that part of it, and then they get off of it after you know, that's done. But, you know, all of that stuff is sort of blanketed all under the same sort of, you know, category. So who should be able to take PEDs, in your estimation?
Well, I'll give you my opinion, man. It's a free country. Like, if you want to do that, I think it's your choice. You're not hurting anybody else. I'm a little bit liberal on that issue. I don't, you know, there's a lot of men, for example, who take hormone replacement therapy, right? As you get older, your testosterone levels, for example, drop. Just basic science, just what happens. Right. And, you know, if a guy takes a little testosterone, then you have all these people going, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing that. But, you know, when a woman loses her hormone, she takes replacement therapy, and that's considered normal.
That's right.
But we got this huge double standard. Well, if a guy does that, you know, and, you know, if you look at the data, like on anabolics, you're not going to find a lot of deaths out there. You know, you're just not going to find them, because guess what? They're not out there. Now, I personally don't advocate, particularly young people, to go out and do that stuff. Particularly young people. I've always thought that the best approach is to achieve the best you can naturally. And then if you want to go a different route, you know, that's fine, but you should always have that base built. You know, the drugs aren't a substitution for good training and good dieting. They're just not. And a lot of people, man, you know, like when I go to the gym, you know, I take hormone replacement therapy personally. I take 150 milligrams of testosterone a week, which is actually super, super low. But, you know, I see 50 guys, you know, through the course of a month at the gym that are taking 10 times what I am, and they only look like they lift weights. Like, it's not a substitution for hard work. You know, you've got to put in the work, and people just think they magically are just going to turn into Mr. Olympia. I'm like, that's not how it works. Right. You know, you build a Corvette, and then that stuff polishes the Corvette. But you got to build the Corvette with hard work. You got to eat. You got to train. You can't just sit at home and pop a few pills and think you're going to wake up and be Mr. Olympia. You know, right. But, you know, I don't care what people do. I just don't care if it's not endangering other people. If it was something that endangered other people, I would be very much against it. So I think a wise person should be under the care of a doctor, though. And I think they should look at their blood work. You know, certain things have impacts on your lipid panel, your HDL, your good cholesterol, and, you know, certain things that you do, you know, if you take too much growth hormone, for example, can raise your blood sugar. You got to be careful of that. So I think if you're going to go that route, you should be very mindful of your health and try to be healthy and stay in one piece. But now the problem you run into is doctors aren't educated on it. Yeah. You know, they have they're still stuck in the stone ages of Lyle Alzado, right? And you know, when I had my heart attack, the doctor said, you know, are you taking any of this stuff? And I said, yeah, I take a little tiny bit of testosterone. And he's like, oh, I think that's good. What could have done it then? And I said, well, then why aren't there tens of thousands of guys having blood clots that are causing heart attacks out there? Like, I don't personally know anybody in bodybuilding that had a blood clot like I did. He's like, well, I don't know. And I said, but you know, I don't fault him for that. They just have no education on it. And there is a lot of education out there. Dr. Serrano is a friend of mine. He sends me studies all the time on testosterone, its impacts on your body, and, you know, low testosterone, how it actually raises your chances of heart attacks and diabetes and depression. And, you know, so I just think people should just get educated and be smart if they're going to do that stuff. You know, that's all.
So what do you think about SARMs?
Well, the problem with SARMs is there's just not a lot of medical data on them. There's just not. I mean, they are, you know, I've seen some studies on one called Ostarine in general. that shows, it does hamper your natural testosterone level. So if you take it long term, you could shut off your own testosterone permanently. I've seen how it negatively impacts your lipid panel. Your HDL goes down, your LDL goes up. So there's potential there for some, calcification in arteries later on, 20 years down the road. There's just not a lot of evidence on SARMs. A lot of them were under, they were in some studies, but then they just never became medically approved. So I don't really think that there's enough data out there to come to really good conclusions. Now, I took Ostarine probably 10 years ago. I tried it myself, and it definitely worked. But it always made me nervous that there just wasn't more information out there on it. So, I didn't take it anymore. But so it works. That stuff definitely works. And I can't tell you that it's going to be terrible for you, or maybe it's not. It's hard. It's really hard to say.